Video games are fun, we can all agree on that, right? They suck you into a whole different world, let you feel like you're the hero, a villain, and so much more. But beyond that, video games are also a great tool for storytelling. A book can give you an idea of a world. A film might show you a world, but a video game. Now, there we have something special. A video game can put you inside of that world. Of course, all of those have their own up and down sides, but since this is a video about games and not literary devices, let's save that discussion for some other time and just jump into today's topic. I do want to point out, however, that these games aren't ranked in any particular order. Rather, they're just 5 great examples of games that tell a story in a particularly well executed or creative way. Who knows, I might make another top 5 like this in the future to expand on it. Number 5. Undertale. This game is very interesting for a number of reasons, not least of which is its pacifist combat system, and through that the commentary and subversion of expectation of normal RPGs, where you're expected to kill anything you come across, even go out of your way to find more things to kill so you can level up. As you play through this game, you'll come to learn that you're supposed to not kill anything, and if you manage to do that, you'll be rewarded with the true ending to the game. Most people, unless you know beforehand, will not quite realize this in time and get stuck in a neutral run, where things more or less happen as they do in a true pacifist run, just with some characters missing and some dialogue being different. If you don't have the patience to sit through a boss fight, you'll see the character disappear from the story. This by itself is already a great thing. Most other games with dynamic stories or branching paths, changes are made based on choices the player makes, whereas Undertale makes these changes based on the actual gameplay accomplishments of the player. Taking that to the next level, you have the genocide run, where you go out of your way to kill anything that you come across, much like you would usually level grind in a normal RPG. In this game, however, the supply of enemies you kill in any given area is very much finite. I had expected, or maybe hoped, that these two runs would more dynamically be linked to each other, being able to go back and forth between them a little easier. As it is though, the game is really almost 2 separate games, one of which is hidden behind you having to know what to do to unlock it. It's like a secret hard mode, almost. It even assumes you've played the other route before you get to the genocide run, building on jokes and themes that will be totally alien to you if you decide to play the genocide first. Not quite what I had hoped for, but a great blueprint for anyone wanting to make an interesting game. Number 4. Shadow the Hedgehog. Where Undertale shows promise in its dynamic story, excluding characters when they're killed and altering dialogue, its main 2 story paths are still very much separate. Once you go into one path, it's almost as if you're playing an entirely different game from the other path. This is where Shadow the Hedgehog comes in. While the game on a technical level is a hot mess, its story structure and how it relates back to the gameplay is exactly what I like to see more of in modern games. This is truly as close to dynamic storytelling as we're probably gonna get, at least until we can procedurally generate stories. But that's another whole thing to figure out. So how does it work? Well, levels are laid out on this chart. Every time you finish a level, you move to the right. But how you finish a level decides if you move up, down, or straight. You see, you have 3 objectives in any given level: the good, the neutral, and the evil. This makes it so that if you do level 1 through the evil objective, the next through the good objective, you're in the same place on the chart as you would have just done 2 neutral moves. This means that while there's only 10 endings in the games, the amount of paths you can take to any given ending is insane. You know what? Here, I'll pick a random ending and show you how many paths there are to take to it. Yeah, that's a lot. And just like in Undertale, it's not choosing some dialogue option that's the deciding factor here. It's whether or not you can fulfill a certain clear condition. So if getting a Chaos Emerald proves too annoying for you and you decide that you want to go with something else, you can still move on, but not on that path, unless you then put some extra effort into getting back onto that path in a later level, of course. It's a shame that such a wonderful system, while bare bones and little more than a tech demo really, is part of such a bad game. Game devs, give this another shot. With some more work, this can be truly the future of storytelling. Number 3. The Stanley Parable. This is a bit of a weird one. Do you remember those choose your own adventure books, where if you had a certain choice then you'd go to different pages depending on what you choose? No? Just me? Well, the Stanley Parable is that, but in video game form, and very, very self-aware. You can just blindly follow the narrator and be done with it, but just because the narrator says you have to do something, doesn't mean you actually have to do it, and if you decide to ignore him, you'll be on your way finding a separate ending. One of which is as easy as refusing to just leave your office. One has you jumping to your death, another has you clipping out of bounds, only to reveal that this is actually part of the game too. It's just a different ending. The funny thing is, the only positive ending is actually the one where you follow the narrator's story. Every other one ends in some sort of bad way. Maybe aside from the broom closet ending. That one is definitely the best. With a few exceptions, I usually dislike it when media becomes too self-aware. The fourth wall is there for a reason. I'm not watching a movie to be reminded that I'm watching a movie. I don't want author's notes in my books, and I don't need to be reminded that I'm playing a video game and anything more than just a clever double meaning every so often. This game, however, is about what it means to be a video game. How it empowers the player to make their own choices and their own story, and to hell with the developer intentions while making it very, very clear that all those clever adventures that you have of the main path were still just the developer's intentions. Number 2. Hollow Knight. Or Dark Souls, or a bunch of other games, really. These sorts of games I like to think more about as world-building games rather than stories. There's no clear story being told. Sure, there's a skeleton of some kind of story there, but not much more than that. There isn't a clear setup, rise to action, and climax. You're thrown into a world that's existed before you came along in the situation and has been ongoing for a long time before you were even relevant. Of course, none of that makes for a particularly well-told story, but through context clues, little pieces of dialogue, item descriptions, such as that, you start to pick up things from the story and piece together things yourself. Who are these characters and how might they relate to each other? The story, in any case, isn't as linear as just telling you what happened. Rather, it's a puzzle that you may or may not care about along with the gameplay. Personally, I like my stories in a more traditional form, and I like Hollow Knight for its satisfying gameplay, not for its deep and complex story. It's just not quite my kind of thing. But even if I personally don't enjoy it as deeply as maybe I could, it doesn't mean that I don't recognize expert craftsmanship when I see it, and for that, I do have to show my respect. That's very well done. Number 1. What Remains of Edith Finch. This game, if you even want to call it that, full video in the cards and description, is the closest to a traditional story. It's a walking simulator. A genre of game that, while filled with a lot of potential, also often ends up being somewhat underwhelming. Not for this game though. This world, as small as it is, feels authentic and alive, and if any game on this list, or even genre, would work as a VR game, this would be it. You're just walking around your old house, learning stories about your whole family and how they all died. This is closer to an interactable movie than it is to a full video game. But that's exactly why it's on this list. Had it been a movie, you couldn't stop to take a look at the gravestones and take your own time exploring around, reading names and admire the details of the art direction. Had it been a movie, you wouldn't have been able to open the windows and crawl through them with actual movement of your mouse, rather than just pressing a button like a traditional video game would have you do. This game, for lack of a better term, really aims to immerse you in its world and stories, not just to take you on an adventure, but to show you the more down-to-earth human story. When developing a story, it's important to think about what media might bring out the most in your story. What are the themes, the premise, the morals, the lesson that can be taken from your story? How do you convey that to your audience in the best way possible? While this might have not been the way this particular game came to be, I do think that its story perfectly fits for the sort of game it's told in, and I for one think it's nothing short of brilliant. With all that being said, I love all of these games for one reason or another. Feel free to let me know what your favorite story-based game is. Was it on the list? Maybe not. I'll look forward to reading about it. If you have made it this far into the video, please do leave a like for me, as you've clearly enjoyed the video and it's taken a while to make. Next time, I have another interesting topic in mind to discuss, so stay tuned for that.